Good evening, everyone. I'm Akush Lapinder. Thanks for joining us. Some reprieve for hurricane survivors. Vehicles can be imported to Grand Bahama and Abaco duty-free. Basic conditions apply, which the government has not yet disclosed. NEMA also announcing plans to set up a distribution center at the Grand Bahama International Airport. Now, this to allow NEMA to collect relief items coming in by air. Those items are to be unpacked, checked, and repackaged into care packages to be distributed to residents. NEMA also reporting that the Ministry of Works has completed assessments in parts of East Grand Bahama. The technical teams comprised engineers, architects, and inspectors, government buildings, and critical infrastructure in McLean's Town, Pelican Point, High Rock, Freetown, Golden Grove, Gambier Point, Turtle Reef, and Bevins Town. Teams have also completed assessments of the Harold de Gregory Complex and Sir Jack Haywood High School. Well, better together. 19 days and counting out of Hurricane Dorian, and Bahamians must muster up the strength and courage to dust themselves off and start over in the face of much adversity. BJ McDermott has the story.
Every adversity, there's an opportunity.
A clarion call goes out for the country's best and brightest minds to put aside all their differences and come together to rebuild. It's a Herculean task that will take much time, tremendous talent, and untold financial resources. But as those who flooded Bahamas Faith Ministries International last evening heard from Bahamas Christian Council President Bishop Jcntvnews, it must be done. Bahamians, he said, must be their brother's keeper.
We must move forward, developing our islands, drafting and enforcing legislation, devising and practicing new protocols and procedures in how we build and where we build. Using the knowledge gained in this horrific storm to be stronger, to be wiser, and indeed to be better.
And that includes the appreciation that people are more important than things.
Many found out that while we place so much importance on material things, only what is done for Christ will last. On those islands at that time, race, class, social status, political affiliation, persuasion, isms, and schisms did not exist. The Bahamian spirit came alive, and we were one in the spirit.
Bishop Fernando expressed hope that Wednesday's National Day of Prayer would not be the last. Reporting for Jcntvnews, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Well, in the midst of such grief and tears, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis last night appealed for spiritual and physical resources to rebuild lives and communities.
Let the common prayer throughout our land be for the gifts of the Spirit needed to heal and to restore. The gift of hope, the gift of generosity, the gift of encouragement, the gift of courage and fortitude, the gift of humility to work in one accord.
With similar sentiments was opposition leader Philip Davis, who stressed that while prayer is essential, there must be action.
Let us get to work. Together, let us help our families, friends, and strangers. That is the Bahamian way. God is with us. And as the songwriter wrote, he ain't heavy, he's my brother.
Last night's prayer service found one pastor after another leaning on God for covering for first responders, saying a prayer for provisions for protection during the remaining months of the Atlantic hurricane season and for restoration. Meantime, the student Christian movement of the R.N. Gomez Comprehensive School in Bullocks Harbor, Berry Islands, joined with civic and religious leaders in their own prayer service at St. Bartholomew Anglican Church. During the service, there were monetary donations for Hurricane Dorian relief efforts. More than 20 students recently joined the school from islands affected by the storm. Meantime, another body recovered from hurricane-ravaged Abaco, bringing the total now to 52. Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands going through the whole process with reporters following retrieval, the bodies being placed in a morgue, a subsequent autopsy to determine cause of death, and a death certificate being created.
Depending on whether or not the bodies can be identified or not, that will then determine disposition of the remains. So if the remains can be identified beyond a shadow of a doubt, then the remains would be, upon completion of the coroner's and pathologist's review, creation of death certificate, the remains would be turned over to family members for disposition, whether it's burial or whatever the choice. If those remains are not able to be identified, then certainly they would have to be retained for a certain period of time as we complete the process of going through the missing persons list.
Bahamians have been braced for a staggering death toll. Still, Dr. Stans continues to stress the need for dignity in recovering each and every victim.
The idea that you would defile or damage the remains of a human being by using heavy equipment inappropriately and so on and so forth has to be taken into consideration. I remind the persons of the approach that took place at Ground Zero after the World Trade Center catastrophe. That was a painstaking recovery process. And what we are seeking to do is to complete this process, but recognizing the humanity and the lives lost.
The question is, how long will it take to move through the remaining parts of Abaco? As Dr. Sands has explained, the reality is some bodies may never be found.
That is, for many families, a horrible reality, because then it's difficult to get closure. It's difficult to determine cause of death. It's difficult to deal with issues of insurance and pass on property, probate, the assets of a missing person or lost person. So this has very real, very significant consequences or repercussions. And we have to deal with this deliberately, methodically, and legally.
You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.